Hey, I'm Nivy and I'm gonna teach you how to paint. Brushes. So what can happen is you end up collecting a lot of different brushes, and I am certainly guilty of that, but I find myself only using a small handful of brushes day in, day out. Portraiture. It's really good just to be able to use the very basic brush you get given in any program, because most programs have the same very basic brush, which is this like hard round brush. And as long as you can switch on the size and the opacity, you can do pretty much any sort of painting. A lot of painters tend to use just the basic painting brushes or something that they've created themselves that they can put in whatever program they have. It's better to learn how to use the basic brush also because it makes you more adaptable, so you can go from like Photoshop to Clip Studio to Sci to whatever, and you're not relying on a particular brush to make your artwork look good. There's also no brush that will magically make you good. Obviously brushes help, but really it's more about learning the technique yourself on how to use those brushes most effectively, rather than like a brush that comes along and magically makes all your artwork better. I wish that was the case. I certainly hoped that's what the case was when I was much younger and starting out in digital work, but it's more about your commanding of the brush rather than what the brush itself necessarily is. Basic hard round brush. I use 3. I'm using 3 at the moment. Again, this is like subject to change because I have been using like a dark pencil based one. These ones are just kind of run-of-the-mill G brush. When you first get into Clip Studio, it's like one of the first brushes it selects, and it's meant for like inking. But if you tone down the anti-aliasing or like tone it up depending on what it's set to and change the opacity, there's like this graph here. We're going to be looking at this graph, and this is basically how the program takes into account the pressure you're applying from your tablet, and you can like alter this up into really funky shapes. And I think Photoshop might have the same thing. Sci and some of the free programs won't have this, but there are ways to work around that, and that's mostly by setting the opacity limit on here to a certain level, because basically I'm just slowly changing what the opacity is doing. And it can be simple as changing this graph, or it can get a bit more complicated, which I know Sci can do. I'm pretty sure. It's been years since I used Sci, but I used to use Sci, and I used to use Photoshop really early on when there was like no other choice. But Photoshop is a photo editing program that people use for art. It's not meant for art, or wasn't originally, so it's kind of like has a lot of features which might not be useful until you know a bit more about art. I know there's some filters in the program that I really wish were in like Clip Studio and some of the other programs, but you know, I haven't missed them too much. You can do workarounds. Or you can do workarounds for a lot of things, and the very basic filters tend to be there. So there's that brush, and that one looks like this. And because it's hard and fast, I'm able to put down what colours I want very quickly, especially if I want like strong outlines and stuff, without it then looking like I'm inking too hard. Like, for instance, this is my inking brush. Can you like see the difference? There's like some smoothness and forgivingness in this, and this is just like how hard it just straight up hard, these ones. Okay, these were called D-Pen. I did rename them to just Paint 1, Paint 2, and Paint 3. And because I named them, I'm able to like cycle through them automatically. I'm just hitting the A key, which is what I map to it. This is one of the useful things. You can map your own keys, but not just one for one brush, one for another. You can like assign the same key to different brushes. As programs like change, very hard to keep track what one program can do over another program, especially if you don't use the other program. So I don't know if this is a feature in anywhere else. I hadn't seen it before. So my second brush is basically almost identical, except a bit more, it's not so sudden with its color. It's a, you know, if I go light, dark, there is this like sudden change here, where, you know, if I'm doing very continuous. So if I'm trying to smooth it, it'll be there, it'll just slowly build up. But if I then press a bit harder, it'll go hard. This is where this graph comes in, because it's literally the same settings as the previous one, except now I've altered the graph to be the steady line up. And that's the difference between, like, if I'm doing that, like that. So it's a lot more slow and then suddenly goes like solid. And I'm doing the same pressure as I was with the other ones. And then the third brush is a bit of a new brush for me. I was messing around with settings and I got this. I was looking at some other people's settings as well, so that's something you can do. Obviously I'm presenting my brushes to you with this gigantic like panel here. So you can go ahead and mess around with the settings I've got and see what suits you, because although settings are really good for one person, it might not be for another because of how heavy your hand is. Some people are like really light and fluffy with their hand, and I'm just like, I'm quite heavy-handed, so take that into account when you're messing around with settings. This is slightly different in the fact that there's actually a whole in Clip Studio there is a whole nother level of like being able to edit your brushes. Photoshop is kind of the same, but you can like change what tip you want on your brush. Like you can literally start building up loads and loads of different shapes and it will orientate between them. This one's called Gap, and this one is kind of like your flow in Photoshop. If you have Photoshop, a lot of artists I've looked at always have their flow quite low. I think that's so you get more of like a texture. It's a bit hard sometimes translating between different programs. If you have Clip Studio, it will tell you what these things are down here. So if you're kind of like, what is this? What am I doing? Then it will tell you. You can also go onto the Clip Studio warehouse, and there's a lot of brushes on there, but most of them are in Japanese, so you kind of have to just download them, try out what they are, and then see if they work for you. There's a couple I've gotten and I've started using. I'm like, what is this? What? So I know because the instructions are in Japanese, so which is not helpful for a non-Japanese speaking artist. Anyway, I'm getting really sidetracked just explaining what things are. Ink is probably the most useful tab for doing painting brushes. For this one, I started like with mixed ground color, and that basically takes into account what color is underneath it, particularly if it's one on one layer, the amount of paint that it will mix with, then the density, so how heavy is it, and then the color stretch, which was how far will it take the color itself. And these can all be switched on with pen pressure, which I have done just to test it out. I found that when I didn't have the pen pressure on, it wasn't behaving like I wanted it to behave. So don't be afraid to mess around with settings, and if you want, you can always duplicate a subtool. Clip Studio is quite forgiving if you duplicate, will give you the chance to duplicate things and save things and all that kind of thing. Anyway, so this one looks like nothing, but if I am to put another color on top of here, it's very good at building up color and it's very good at blending things. So really you have a color putter down, a kind of color putter down / blending, and then a blender. Those will help with what you're doing. Those are what I'm going to be using. You may see me switch to other brushes, and I assure you that that's probably accidentally because I press keys on my keyboard without realizing it. Like I've got Z switched to my inking brushes for comic reasons, and I'll start using it. Like, why isn't it blending? And it's like, yeah, because I'm on my inking brush.